by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Lilia able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Perry in the face, 1-1. Score! On the board! Paul Kariya!
So I'm on Evolving Hockey, looking at the expected goals above replacement totals for.
As you do.
I was looking at the Ducks to see where we're kind of at, and I was like, "Wow, that looks pretty pathetic." Let me look at like a contender and see what theirs looks like. And I went to Edmonton. And it's like, yeah, it's different. Looks closer to how I would expect like a team that's supposed to be a legitimate contender would look. But here's the thing that makes me laugh, and I think is incredibly funny. Leon Draisaitl has double the amount of expected goals above replacement that Connor McDavid has. He genuinely is having a pretty incredible year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
like,
I mean,
I still fucking hate him. He's still fucking overrated. Screw him. But in my dual anti-McDavid and anti-Draisaitl agenda, this is a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about, or it's been out there, is how good is Leon Draisaitl versus is it just playing with McDavid, right? Like, that's been the argument for a while, and it's not that he's not a good player. Like he's an elite talent anywhere, but it's like the whole early days of Malkin conversation, right? Is like how good is Gino, or is he just benefiting from the fact that Sid plays in front of him? And then with McDavid going down a little bit this year, and Leon, he's not, and McDavid's still playing great. Don't get me wrong, but not at the same level as the last couple of years where he was like 30 points in front of anybody else in the scoring race. So
for the record,
kind of taking that this year.
As much time as has been missed or whatever by McDavid, he has only missed 6 games compared to Draisaitl. He's only played 6 fewer games, and he's only played 100 minutes less. Draisaitl is at 12:53. He's at 11:48.
What are they at points wise this year?
Ooh,
they're both like top 15, top 10, right?
All right, let me see. Seasons, stats, skaters. Leon Draisaitl and Nathan McKinnon are tied at 87. McDavid's a bum. He has 73.
He's what, tied for 4th?
He's tied for 4th with Mitch Marner.
Future Duck Mitch Marner.
Future Duck Mitch Marner. That's right.
Do we got to start? I mean, I feel like this has been a thing every year, but when does Jesper Bratt get more praise for what he seems to be doing year in, year out?
See, here's the problem with that is people who I have a particular dislike of have been on the Jesper Bratt bandwagon for a few years, and so I've been very reluctant to give it any credence just because the person in question annoys me so much. But yeah, I think he's like kind of the real deal. He seems to be pretty fucking incredible.
Oh yeah, remember when we wanted Travis Konechny on the Ducks? He's having a good year too.
Yeah, we weren't wrong.
Yeah, we know who we were wrong about with Sam Reinhart though.
Which good for him.
Yeah, I'm okay to be wrong about that, but yeah, 31 goals and 63 points in 59 games.
Card Raquel has a higher XGAR than Connor McDavid, just as we all knew.
I love it.
Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff we have to talk to. Do you just want to go straight into the Four Nations?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we didn't miss much in the last 5 games since then. Well, I guess we had 2 games, I think, after the last pod before Four Nations, and then I think 3 games after. So most of the time off since the last pod has been Four Nations focused.
Very fortunate for us.
Yeah, and it was great. I listen. I mean, I think it was great because we won, so it's easy from my end.
Yeah, it was a fake tournament. It didn't count.
Yeah,
we didn't have
the series is tied at 1-1, right?
Exactly. I mean, we drew. It was a series draw so far, and I think it's important to point out that um, we didn't have the second best player on our team, arguably the first best player on our team, and so it's interesting. It's interesting. I just think maybe we would have kicked your ass significantly more if we actually did have Quinn Hughes. Because you guys have to rely on McDavid, who sucks.
Yeah, McKinnon, Makar,
McKinnon's fine. Makar's okay.
Jordan Binnington.
Look, I don't even need to get to the jokes about the goaltending. That's too real.
Yeah,
but
if you take out the championship game overtime, and everybody was valid for getting on Jordan Binnington's case, and then you add in championship game overtime, and that washes it all away. The 3 or 4 saves. That
Look, that's fuck, man. I can't believe this is where we're headed. But I think of all the reasons to like Jordan Binnington as a goalie, it's that as much as he is a liability because he's so hot-headed and he's so inconsistent and he's going to have games where he just gives up fucking stupid goals and you're just like, what are you doing, dude? He also is so arrogant that you can't put him on a rink with 11 other players and him not think, oh, I totally belong here.
Yeah.
You could make the other goalie fucking Dominic Hasek or Jacques Plante, and Jordan Binnington would be like, I mean, they're pretty good, but clearly I'm better. That arrogance, that arrogance, it's almost like a wide receiver arrogance, where it's like, oh, you stopped me 4 plays in a row? That's crazy because I'm gonna catch the next 4, and I actually don't care. It's you need that, and I think that is the reason he can't have a great run like he did the year they won the cup. But it's also when you've seen other years where you're like, oh, yeah, he's really bad this year. And it's like, yeah, because he's inconsistent.
Well, he's the first 3 games of the tournament.
Yeah, he is not a great goalie, but he is capable of having great plays. And there is something to
I mean, you look at everything outside of his career versus the Stanley Cup run, and that's proven enough. Right there, he's a gamer. He can show up in big games, right? And I guess
he's not afraid of big moments. I don't want to say necessarily that he's a gamer, but yes, I guess in a sense he is. But we've seen him crack under those circumstances.
Yeah.
What was it? The second round of the playoffs when they went up and he's throwing fucking water bottles at Nazem Kadri and shit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We've seen him crack, but he's not afraid of it, and there is something to that.
Yeah, it's if you look at the options going into the tournament, we laughed and joked about Canada's goaltending options not being great.
Should have been Cam Talbot.
Proving my point is Cam Talbot is the option to be your starting netminder when you look at the fact that you've got Hellebuck and Ottinger as your 1-2. And plenty of other options even after that of guys that you could bring that you could argue were better than what Canada was able to bring. Logan Thompson maybe should have been the guy who came, but even then you're still you're having the same argument you are with Hill, with Binnington. Is he really? Can he be really the guy? He's had a great year for sure, and he's been okay in the past. But this is a question mark you have with a lot of these guys. So you see Binnington who comes in, has won a Stanley Cup, has been able to be that guy in key games, and Hill obviously led the Golden Knights to a Stanley Cup, and he occasionally can be that guy. Now, obviously, I think him maybe more so than Binnington benefits from being in Vegas and in that system and the way they play. But, I mean, when you're so short-handed, those are the guys you got to bring, right? The guys who've done it, who've at least done it all and won in big games and had those big moments.
I think there's absolutely something to that for sure. Let me ask you this. Do you think the teams like brass would have been better suited waiting longer to announce the teams?
In what sense?
Because,
to avoid what?
If they don't have to announce it, they announced the teams, a month and a half, 2 months ago?
Something like that, yeah.
A good amount of time away. If they don't have to announce it till a week out, is Logan Thompson on the squad?
I see. Apparently, he has issues with some people in Hockey Canada.
Yeah, the
and that's
rumor
why
is
he didn't
it's
go.
Peter DeBoer and Bruce Cassidy. So
So I don't think, regardless, that
that's fair.
he's
That's fair.
on the roster. He had a good enough season leading up to that point, regardless of being 1 or 2 months out from it. That I
So
think
can
he should have been in at least over Montembeault, right? Like, that's the thing. If you're gonna take Montembeault on having a good season with Montreal, you could take Logan Thompson at the same time of having a better season on a better team with Washington, right? So
can we also stop pretending that this was a bad Canada team?
no, I don't know who's saying it's bad candidate.
Dude,
Beyond beyond in net
no,
being
like people have
questionable, but still.
genuinely said that this Canada team is one of the lesser talented Canada teams. I don't understand how that's possible.
I think that's nostalgia. I think a little bit when.
I mean, yeah, Colton Parayko being on the team isn't necessarily great, but that's one dude.
So what we're comparing it to, I guess, then the 2010 roster.
Sure.
And is that so? I gotta go back and see that.
But like,
let's see. So we had, well, I mean, in that it's obvious because
Sure,
it's
yeah.
Fleury, Luongo, Brodeur. On defense, I honestly, so is Parayko the same as what Brent Seabrook was when Brent Seabrook was on that roster? You could argue potentially he does a bit more.
I think Brent Seabrook was a better player.
So you've got.
I'm a
on
big
that,
Brent Seabrook guy, though.
Drew Doughty's on both teams,
Right.
So that's you had Niedermayer, Dan Boyle, Chris Pronger, Shea Weber, Duncan Keith on that blue line. I think you could argue certainly more talented depth-wise, but you can still make the case that maybe Cale Makar is the best of
Right.
all of those defensemen, right?
And again,
So
to be fair, I understand that the other names on that roster are Chris Pronger and Scott Niedermayer, who are great. But, like, there's an outside chance, and a not insignificant one, and a very real thing people are talking about, that Cale Makar could be the best offensive defenseman since Ray Bourque.
yeah,
Like,
And,
completely jumping Erik Karlsson, who was transcendent for his generation.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the bottom half of that roster. I think a lot of people are looking at, like, okay, Brendan Hagel's there, and Anthony Cirelli's there, and, like, are these guys?
When did Anthony Cirelli become a bad player?
He wasn't, but what I think, like, it's nostalgia. You're looking back and you remember Taves, you remember Bergeron and Getzlaf and Crosby that were there, but Brendan Morrow was on that team. Mike Richards was on that team. Like, is Cirelli any worse than what Mike Richards would have done? They were brought in on that team to do the same thing, right? Like, Hagel and Morrow, in a sense, are similar in terms of what they're asked to do on that team. So Sam Bennett is, another Eric Stahl, I guess, type player in terms of what you're asking for from to play for Team Canada. Now, I don't think he's obviously Eric Stahl when Eric Stahl was on that team, but what he's asked to do on the roster for there, I think it's tough to say it's the worst Canada team ever. There's an argument.
Not ever, but like I've definitely heard among the worst, and I just think that's so ridiculous.
I think that I think that's wrong. When you could argue they have the two best players in the world on their team in McKinnon and McDavid, and the best defenseman in the world in Cale Makar, then it's really
I'm so sorry.
tough argument
You just said
to be had.
3 names talking about best in the world, and you didn't say the actual best player in the world.
Leon Draisaitl?
No, Sidney Crosby.
I know.
What do we do? What? This is why him scoring that goal to win the championship game is going to bug me forever, because people are like, it's the handoff. It's the passing of the torch of one great Canadian center to the next great Canadian center. It's like, nah, man. U.S. fucked up. But, like, McDavid isn't Crosby. Like, he's not. He's not yet. We can have this
he's not.
This is an argument. You know what? We should have this argument with Avery in the summer.
Yeah. I mean, if we're saying best in the world, we're saying best offensive talents in the world. When I'm speaking of McKinnon and McDavid, and I still think Crosby was the best player on that team. It even furthers the argument, and then you could say you have potentially the three best players in the world in Crosby, McKinnon, and McDavid on that roster.
Matthews is better.
Matthews is up there for
McDavid,
sure.
McKinnon, so.
You have Makar, and again, you can argue Makar or Hughes, but are two of the best defensemen in the league. So it's a Canada team who has three of the best players in the league and the best defenseman, one of the best defensemen in the league. It's really hard to make that argument that it's a bad team, and then you fill that out with the rest, Brad Marchand, and the rest of the players and talent you have on that roster, like Sam Reinhart, we just talked about.
Travis Konecny's a 40-goal scorer.
Right, he's over a point per game player playing on the third, fourth line and being a healthy scratch for some of these games, right? Thomas Harley is the guy who comes up to replace Shea Theodore, and he's had an excellent season. The talent pool is ridiculous for Canada to pull from, and yeah, again, it's just it's very easy to look back at the names, Taves, Thornton, Bergeron, Crosby, all playing there, and say, well, yeah, these guys. We have so much nostalgia for these guys. You can compare it to some of the guys on the roster now, but I think the only way you can really compare it is you wait to the end of these guys' careers and you look back at this roster and try and compare it that way, because it's very hard to say, well, is Mike Richards significantly better than Anthony Cirelli, and so on, right? So I think it's definitely an exaggeration. And the only thing you can clearly state is this is one of the best American teams that they've ever had.
I think it's not the best American team of all time
they've ever had.
Dude, Bleacher Report put out all-time international rosters for Canada and the U.S., and maybe they did more. I didn't see them. It took me forever to find the U.S. one alone. Bro, that was so fucking sad. Like, just looking I was like, oh my god, like we're looking
at 2010. Let's go look at the 2010 American roster. Like it's
a good team, but like we were taking David Backes, bro. Like, what are we doing?
Let's see. Yeah. Brian Rafalski, Ryan Malone.
No, we're not going to sit here and slander Brian Rafalski. That's not what's going to happen.
David Backes. Yeah.
You got Lang and
Tim Gleason. Brooks Orpik. Yeah. Like
Brooks Orpik. Yuck.
I mean, your best players really are Patrick Kane and Zach Parise at that time.
Who's the number one center on that team?
Kessler, probably Pavelski, I would say.
Okay, Pavelski's a great player. Pavelski's a genuinely great player.
Yeah, he was 25 at the time too, so it even wasn't peak Pavelski was like late 20s into his 30s. Right?
Somehow he was, yeah. Somehow his best years were the years.
He didn't even really have that great of a tournament. It was Kane and Parise and Ryan Malone that were the guys that got things going. But yeah, it wasn't. You can't even compare now.
Was Phil Kessel even on that team in 2010?
Phil Kessel was 22 on that team. He had 2 points in 6 games. It was a relatively young forward group for the U.S.
Yeah, 2014 would have been our best bet.
Yeah. And they were at the Olympics in 2014? Or was that World Cup of Hockey?
No, 2014 was
Sochi, right?
Sochi, yeah.
Yeah, even then though, like Kessel, Pavelski, Van Riemsdyk, Backes, Kessler, Oshie, Kane, Shattenkirk.
Ryder,
it's Fowler's on that team.
Bobby Ryan's on that team.
Blake Wheeler.
I think it's fine.
Justin Falk, Paul Martin, Derek Stepan played one game for that team.
Paul Martin was a good player, man. He wasn't like. It's not great that he was
players
on the international team, but Paul Martin was a real good player for a few years there. He had a hell of a time in San Jose. Good for Paul Martin. Shout out to Paul Martin and Brian Rafalski, legends in the game.
It just doesn't even compare to.
Speaking of players and depressing and international tournaments, are there 2 players who came out of this tournament with more, I guess, to prove than Adam Fox and Elias Peterson?
Yeah,
Patterson?
No, I don't think so. That's Matthews a little bit, but Matthews' role was different. Like Matthews was asked to be like a defensive center, and he was kind of the piece they plugged in when guys got hurt, and he was good. I would say, from if we're putting Matthews in the McKinnon, McDavid, Crosby territory, you kind of hope and expect him to dominate, right?
You would hope.
And I think you could have the conversation about him, but Fox and Elias Peterson were not good. They just weren't. I mean, Mikko Rantanen wasn't that great either, to be honest with you, and that's a tough one. I think Barkov was good, but
Saros wasn't good.
Saros has not been good for Nashville for most of this year anyway, so that's that's something
So
I don't
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think there was anybody on Canada that underperformed significantly, right? Like I don't think on the U.S. there was too many people. Like again,
I
Fox, I think you
mean,
could say for
McDavid
sure. I
had
think,
2 big moments, and that's it.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
he had
maybe
a
you can
goal in the
lump him
first game and a
into
goal in the second game, and like,
the Matthews argument then, and say they were still good, but they weren't
yeah, I think that's a
by
little
far and
fair.
away the best
Like,
players
I
in the
think
tournament.
I think Nathan McKinnon looked like a fucking star
Oh, he
in
looked like
in the whole
arguably the best
contest, in the
player.
whole tournament. He looked
Yeah,
like a fucking
yeah.
star. That's a dude.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not even gonna lie, dude. I was literally sitting there watching him, and again, this is why all the very smart people at Elite Prospects hate player comps.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I didn't literally have this thought, which was watching Nathan McKinnon be Nathan McKinnon and go, we really didn't fucking draft Adam Fantilli, bro.
Hmm.
And I love Leo. Super happy. Like, I think Leo is, especially the last little bit, which we'll get into, I think he's started to pick it up a little bit more. He's getting more comfortable and things like that. But, like, love Leo. Very happy with Leo. Really looking forward to this kid's future. But watching Nathan McKinnon and knowing that the comp-ish, again, imperfect metric that it is,
Yeah.
was Nathan McKinnon for Adam Fantilli. I was like, bro, we really didn't draft this fucking guy. Look at how good Nathan McKinnon is. And
Yeah.
that's
It's
the problem with the comps. So, like...
I mean, you would say like if comps and if the comps were accurate and things turned out in the best possible way, it's like taking Alexander Barkov over Nathan McKinnon, right? You don't lose out, but you'd lose. You know what I mean? You still win, but you lose a little bit, right?
Yeah,
You don't.
for sure.
You get Barkov, but you don't get McKinnon. So it's tough. But yeah, like he was, for me. I mean, outside of Sid and Sid for different reasons, I think like he was the most dynamic player, Nathan McKinnon, at the Four Nations for sure. And yeah, for to get to Pedersen and Fox, like Pedersen was that was a rough tournament. It's been a rough like little go for him here, but I thought this was one of the more talented Sweden rosters that they've had in a while in terms of depth, and
They had
nothing
nothing
going.
bro.
Kempe was okay. I liked Kempe. I thought he was pretty good, but
Carlson was okay-ish. Hedman was okay-ish. Like,
yeah,
I think what you're
you could argue
seeing
that
is
roster is right
Sweden.
there.
I mean,
Talent-wise, they're right there. Maybe not
Who-
having a Matthews or McKinnon.
who is their number one center for that Sweden?
It should be Elias Pettersson.
Okay,
It should be.
so it's Pedersen and Lindholm. That's
And Zibanejad.
that's an NHL 1-2, not an international 1-2, right? Their defense, I think, is kind of in an in-between place.
I mean, they're lacking some
Dynamism.
of the yeah.
You know,
but
you know
it's
what
such
they
a
don't
good
have on that
team.
roster?
What?
The Sedins.
Yeah.
Think
fair,
about when
yeah.
Finland was great. They were just like, we have Teemu Selanne. Like, we have that
Yeah.
guy. We have that
Would-
guy.
Would you not
Elias
say
Pettersson should
like
be, which is part of why he comes so bad. And again, I do think this is important to say. I have seen people who I don't think of as what do you call it, dramatic or overreactive in the Vancouver market who feel that he is definitely hurt and playing through it. And his season-ending interview, Walking Dead announcement is going to be pretty serious. But if Elias Pettersson isn't the 100-point version of Elias Pettersson that we've seen, Sweden doesn't have the juice. At least not until Leo Carlson, turns into Sasha Barkov.
Would you not say talent-wise, and I know this can be a stretch, but Pettersson and Nylander should be able
Yes.
to be
Nylander's-
Henrik and
yes.
Daniel.
Yeah.
And maybe you could say Forsberg, but I would say it's Pettersson and Nylander that should be the guys. Nylander had 2 assists in 3 games. And I believe I'm right when I say Pettersson went pointless, right? Yeah, in 3 games he went pointless. So your big guys. didn't get it done. And then the leading scorer for Sweden was Karlsson. Erik Karlsson with 3 points in 3 games. Lucas Raymond had 3 points in 3 games, 3 assists, and that was it. Nobody had more than 1 goal for Sweden.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Arvidsson's fine.
On
Jesper Bratt, who we were just talking about, maybe you want to see more from him.
Philip Forsberg went pointless in that tournament.
Joel Eriksson is a bummer. But, like, you're still taking rough, fucking man. Gus Nyquist. Like, what are we doing?
I mean, that's perfectly fine as a bottom pairing guy. I mean, when you look at, like, your...
You mean a fourth line guy. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, your top 9 is, like, Bratt, Eriksson, Forsberg, Kempe, Nylander, Pettersson, Raymond, Zibanejad. Like, that's good enough to do something. And they just really were. I mean, like, they pushed some teams, and they won a game. They beat the U.S. 2-1. So there's just more. There's just more. I felt like they should have been able to do with that roster. I do think, in as much as it, like, I think, you know, Finland is probably one of the teams that plays the hardest with the least. I think they by far had the worst roster. Finland did. But that team just always pulls together in any tournament that they're in. And just grinds out results. I know they got hammered by the U.S. in the first game.
They just have no defense.
Yeah, their
forward group, honestly, is pretty strong.
The top 6 is very, very good. It does have a heavy drop off, but the top 6 is good.
But without Heiskanen, man, they got nothing on that back end. That is brutal.
Yeah, it's one of the when we talk about one of the weaker teams, it can be one of the weaker Finland teams in terms of the blue line, but the forward talent they have, the upper echelon forward talent. It's been a while. I mean, for a while, it was, like you said, it was just Teemu, and at times it's just been just one guy or one or two guys. But you got Barkov, Aho, Rantanen, right? Like, that's 3 superstars in the NHL. But the rest of the teams are just so good. It's impossible for them to keep up and to get going. But I mean, all things considered, like, the tournament was great though. I loved it.
It was a total success.
Yeah, it was a win for everybody involved. And you know, the thing we said beforehand, and I was concerned about is I just want these guys to give a shit about it. Like, you want them to care, and you want it to be good hockey, and it was by far and above delivered on what we hoped and what we were concerned about.
Yeah, I agree. I think you know, you could tell that these guys, this generation of American players, like, wanted to make a point, and you could tell that, like, the Canadian players knew that, and they were a little bit older and ready to, like, shut that shit down. But they'd never played. These guys haven't played each other since, like, World Juniors. Mm-hmm. You know, and then it's so stratified, and, you know, because of the ages and stuff like that, that, like, look, this tournament, but those 2 games alone between the U.S. and Canada justified all of the complaining, all of the frustration about the way the NHL as a corporation, as a league, has handled international hockey and the Olympics and not letting these fucking guys go. Think about how much more juice this league would have right now, you know, if we got 2 or 3 of these over the last few years in a meaningful way. Yeah,
you could argue we should have had 3 if everything was working as it should. We would have had 2018 Olympics, 2020 World Cup, and 2022 Olympics again, right? Mm-hmm. So you should have at least the Olympics. I know the World Cup was somewhere in between there, right? Or when was the World Cup of hockey? Was it before Sochi?
2017, I think.
2017. So yeah, so we got at least one of the 3, but you miss out on 2 big ones with the Olympics there.
Yeah, it's just a total bummer, man. And yeah. It was great to see it deliver. It was great that the games were good. It was awesome to see how much they cared. Like, I mean, do you even want to talk about all the other stuff around the Four Nations tournament?
Like what?
The anthems and...
Yeah, we can. I mean, it definitely had it had a bit more of a rivalry vibe than it normally would, with a lot of these guys not playing each other in a while because of obviously the political aspect and environment surrounding the game. I don't know. I think because I know in Montreal the fans booed the American national anthem. I don't think it was received the same in Boston for the championship game, right?
I think there was like mixed boos, but I think that some people in the Boston crowd booed the Canadian anthem, which people, were like.
It fed into the rivalry.
It
for
created
sure.
an atmosphere for sure, but it was also like. It also created like weird stuff like around the tournament, right? Where you're trying, what did Bill Guerin say? What are these players like? And like, I don't want to like fuck around with this. Like, this shit sucks, man. Like the place that the United States is in right now just fucking blows. It just super fucking sucks. And to have, so let me say it this way. We have a mutual friend, Chris. He came over and watched the first game between Canada and U.S. at my apartment, and we were texting you while we were watching it, and we were all having a great time. I have been waiting for 10 years for that game. And the fact that, like, as much fun as that game was, there was all this bullshit around it, about, like, is the team trying to win for Trump? Are they trying to win for the United States? Are they buying into this? It became almost impossible to tell even if some of this was like wrestling shit, right? Like, is any of this kayfabe? Like, any of it? Like, because we can all be honest. We know how these guys vote. Like, it just is what it is. We understand the, like, socioeconomic and political demographics that make up the NHL. But it's just like, for me, I'm just like, dude, I just want to watch this fucking game. I just want this to be so dope. And I can't be mad at anybody in Canada for being like, dude, fuck you. Like, talking about they're going to go beat Canada and make them the 51st. Like, go fuck you, dude. Like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, I can't even talk on it from your side. I know from our side, the talk comes in is it just gave them another reason and more motivation to want to win, to not only just win for themselves and the pride and whatever for winning the tournament, but John Cooper put it as kind of winning one for the country as well, with all just the shit that we've gone through over the last couple months with everything, right? Like, I couldn't imagine from your side the conflicting, watching the game and wanting to cheer for them but feeling a little bit off about cheering for them because of everything that's going on. Like, it's it just puts you in an awkward position.
Yeah, dude, because, like, like, via Twitter and hockey Twitter and, when I was writing and stuff like that, like, I have friends that are Canadian. You are a friend of mine who is Canadian. And, like, this idea that, like, I'm, like, rooting for a team and that team is kind of, like, tacitly or even overtly supporting this idea of, like, annexing our closest and longest ally, like, it feels weird. Like, it feels really gross. And, like, there's been a weird disconnect that has been kind of, this is so much bigger than this, whatever, I don't give a shit. I have kind of, for myself, gone into this weird place mentally where, like, I try to assume that, like, half of whatever Donald Trump fucking says, he's just saying in the moment.
Yeah.
But if I lived somewhere else and this dude was like, oh yeah, we're going to come fucking take your country from you, I don't have the luxury of being like, oh, is this a thing he means? And so he says this shit out loud, and I'm like, he sounds so stupid. We're never going to do this. This would never happen. Like, what in the fucking world? But, like, if I'm fucking Canadian, I'm sorry, you're going to do what? You're going to, Like, this isn't funny. And so it's just, like, this whole thing of, like, watching this, like, agenda, this absurd fucking nationalist agenda be co-opted into what is one of my favorite rivalries in professional sports, or in any sports, I should say.
Yeah.
Like, I feel really bad rooting against Canada for all my Canadian friends who are like, like, it doesn't mean anything, but it doesn't mean nothing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's for me. It's just it's a distasteful joke, is what it feels like. But it comes at a really bad time for the country here with a lot of the shit that we're dealing with. So it just piles extra shit on that. It's like, why are we having to deal with
Right.
that added on with everything else? Like, again, at the back of your mind, you're like, this guy's not serious. Like, it is what it is. Like, this is just a guy, like you said, that kind of says the first thing that comes to his mind, and a lot of it usually isn't probably the smartest thing to say or the right thing to say, or is tasteful in any means, whether it's a joke or not. And at other times, you can probably take it more as a joke, but when the country's going through what it's going through right now, and then you have real world actions being taken that kind of take it out of being a joke a little bit with the tariffs and
Right.
everything. It just throws kind of a weird shadow over the whole
Yeah, for
situation,
sure.
right? It's in the background, like you're watching it, just trying to enjoy good hockey, and you still are, but the discourse from a lot of people in the media, it does shift away from hockey every now and then, because it is a real world situation that's happening, and you can't really go any day without hearing about it. So then the two just kind of blend together in a really uncomfortable way, and a very bad comparison I heard, but it has similarities as Summit Series in Canada versus the Soviet Union, and how, I mean, that was obviously politically charged, that entire tournament, but it had weird vibes of that because of the situation,
for
right?
sure.
Where it does. I mean, most of us have not had to go through a sporting situation like that, and obviously the closest thing we could have got to is Russia being included in some tournaments over the last couple of years, but they haven't been, right? So like we've avoided that up until this point, and obviously it's nowhere near as serious, but it just had those vibes in the background that you couldn't ignore.
No, and it just, again, like I think you hit it perfectly. Like, it just left like a weird taste in everybody's mouth, and everybody's just like, yeah, dude, that was some of the best hockey we'll see all year. Like, there's a very slim chance we'll get two better games, you know, in the Stanley Cup final. Like, it was perfect hockey. It was awesome. Like, I absolutely loved every minute of it. And then at the same time, I'm just like, I don't know, man. I feel like I kind of need a shower for having as much fun with that as I did, because like, this shit's a little gross, and this fucking and it's just, I don't ever think sports should be treated solely as escapism. I think it would be fucking politically disingenuous beyond belief to like sit here and pretend that I feel that sports is sacred, or
Yeah.
this sanctified air. But like, goddamn, man, would it have been really nice if I did not have to think about that shit during those two games, and in the environments around those games, and in the lead ups and the come outs and all that stuff. Like, it would have been really nice to just have two great fucking hockey games. But that isn't the world we live in. And so like, that, you just got to take it as it comes. But like,
Yeah, and like I said too, like, it's very hard from my end to like, I can see it, and it's a whole different experience where it's less conflicting from our end to watch it. It's almost more unifying, where the
For
country's
sure.
like just back behind the team, and it's something we would have done anyway. So it just adds a little bit more fuel to the fire, and it doesn't change the watching aspect more than anything. Like, we all love to hate the Americans when we play them in any tournament, and then it ends after the tournament. It just so happens this case, like, it does extend because it wasn't all about just the hockey this time. But yeah, I couldn't imagine. Like, you're not the only one. I've talked to a few people that I know from down there, and it's been conflicting views. Either some people they don't give a shit, and it is what it is, and then there's people the same as you that it's so conflicting to watch. And I feel like if I was in the same situation, it'd probably be the same boat for me as you're in, where it's a very awkward feeling to watch it, because you just want to watch it for hockey, but you just can't help but avoid everything else that's going on, because you see it on a daily basis as well. And like I said, the media likes to link the two together as much as they can, so you can't even escape it. You can't even watch just the hockey and not hear anything about it, right? Like,
right.
we're seeing quotes come out from Bill Guerin talking about it. Trump's calling the team before the game. making comments about the 51st state and everything. Like, it was impossible to avoid
Yeah.
it because it was just being thrust into every aspect of the games.
Yeah, there could not have been worse timing if you're the NHL for this tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, the majority of the results. There was I forget who the interview was with, but with Gary Bettman, I think he was on the Pat McAfee show, and it was a win for the NHL.
Yeah.
They thought it was a unanimous win. There was really nothing they could do about the political environment, but I mean, the coverage that hockey was starting to get from fans outside of just hockey, right? Outside of the hockey world, from just the sports world in general. It's arguably the most I've seen in a very long time. All at one time of people just kind of recognizing hockey and deciding to watch because of these two games of people who normally wouldn't watch hockey. I think it's the most I've seen outside of an Olympic year, right?
100%.
Like, it really,
100%.
You just couldn't see this from an NHL standpoint among any two teams that would draw as much attention as this did. I mean, that's the beauty of international hockey, right? Is it just puts the game on people's plates that wouldn't normally tune in or necessarily watch, right? So, I mean, if anything, it proved to the NHL that they made a big mistake not having international hockey over the last 8 years, 10 years.
Okay. Let's get back into that shit and talk about this part of it. I have been so fucking annoyed with people being like, praising the NHL for doing this thing. You mean this thing that literally all of their fans have been begging them to do for 10 years, that the players have been asking them to do for 10 years? They finally did the thing that everybody said, you should probably do this. It'd be really good for you. They finally decided to stop being an asshole about it because they were in complete and total control of the whole process, which is the only reason that this happened.
And it still...
You don't get credit. You don't get credit.
Yeah.
You certainly don't get... Well, let me say it this way. You don't get praise and you don't get extra credit. You did it. Congratulations. You gave us the thing. You completed the assignment. Thank you very much. You can go sit back down.
Well, what was the major issue the NHL had? One of the major issues the
It's
NHL
the money.
had with... Well, that, but what was the publicly the issue they said on why they didn't want to play hockey in the middle of the season?
Was it injuries?
They don't want guys to get hurt.
Whoops.
Well, we come out of this tournament, McAvoy's done for pretty
year.
much the rest of the
Matt
season.
Tkachuk might be done for the
might
year.
be done for the rest of the year.
Okay, wait a minute. It's only American guys don't like this.
Several other guys came out of this
Oh,
tournament
Shea Theodore's hurt, so that's fine.
with injuries, yeah, and are potentially done for the rest of the year. Like, and obviously superstars, because that's what this tournament was full of, is NHL superstars on pretty much every player on the team, on each of the teams is categorized as that. So they didn't avoid that. So that excuse goes right out the window. We lost, 24 days. 20 days of NHL hockey and time on the schedule, so you can't even say it's a scheduling issue anymore, and that's why you don't want to do it, because you don't want to be playing games later into April, regular season games later into April, because that's going to happen. You can't argue that the All-Star game needs to be played, because clearly it didn't, and nobody really likes the All-Star game anyway, so it just makes it a very obvious they want to be able to control it for the money, right? And great, it worked out, and that's it, but you can't praise them for just, hey, this thing we've taken away from you for 10 years, here it is. We control it. We make all the money, so we're giving it back to you now. Thank us for doing so, even though everybody has been calling for it since we didn't go to the Olympics in 2018.
It's just absurd. The ability of the NHL to just do something, and people who with no familiarity with the NHL to be like, oh, this is incredible. Look at the dynamism at the leadership at the top. Like, I genuinely saw someone being like, they should be applauded for appreciating that the All-Star game was stale and that it needed to change. That's not what the fuck happened. That's not at all what happened. What are you doing? Like, it's very frustrating to me to watch people who don't deserve credit or praise for something get it in a way that is going to cover up. I mean, I guess the best way to say it is it feels like gaslighting, right? It's just like, no, I know what's real, but you're trying to tell me that it's not, and that I should actually be very proud of my league.
I also wanted to talk about the All-Star game situation. Like, can you tell me a league that has an All-Star game that people genuinely are excited to watch nowadays?
None of them.
None. Like, the NBA All-Star Game has devolved to a point where people hate it because for the very reason we hate the NHL All-Star Game is it's just not competitive. Like,
Right.
there's no reason to watch it. The guys don't care. And I guess the NFL's equivalent of the All-Star Game is the Pro Bowl, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen people criticize that. You could maybe argue that that one is potentially the most exciting of the few, and even then, it really isn't. Like, there isn't an All-Star Game. Maybe the most exciting all-star activity that you get is the home run derby. I could say maybe that gets put at the top. I'm not even a huge baseball fan, but at least like that's something the guys are going
The
for.
home run derby and the dunk contest are the two biggest events.
Dunk contest used to be for sure.
So
much anymore.
I mean, look, I'll grant you that it has lost some of its luster to a degree, but it's still the marquee event of that whole weekend.
It is. It would be great if like just everybody wanted to participate in that event, and you got the guys I think everybody really wants to see.
Sure. I think, but again, I don't know, like maybe you feel a little bit differently because the gap in age for us, but like I got to see Dwight Howard put on the Superman cape. I got to see him blow out the light on the candle. I got to see Blake jump over the front of a Kia.
It used to be the only reason I watched
Zach Levine and Eric Gordon going head to head in what was that, 2013, 2014, where fucking Gordon sat down in the middle of his jump. He just sat down and dunked, like it matters. Like I do think those events still matter. And I think the thing that the NHL has struggled with is finding an event that can generate that kind of buzz, even if it is only for 10 minutes. And then I think, part of the other problem, I think there are two problems. One is these guys make so much money that the money that they could make at the All-Star Game is irrelevant, which was not always the case. These guys used to not make enough money, so playing at the All-Star Game was a big deal. But the other thing is these guys all know each other, and they've been playing together for forever. So part of the fun of the All-Star Game is getting to see guys play together that you've never seen play together. You know what I mean? Like the idea of, Michael Vick passing it to Calvin Johnson is just an insane and novel idea that you're just like, oh, that's cool. I just want to watch that happen. I think because Howard Bryant talks about this, that like interleague play happening so early now in baseball kind of ruined the All-Star Game in a sense, because there used to be like real pride about like our league is better than your league. And I think it's true too. Like you see all these guys now. We see these guys all the time. I can go on ESPN Plus and watch almost any team on any given night. That used to not be the case. The All-Star Game used to be the only time you used to get to see certain guys. And the benefit of national TV deals and all this stuff is that that's not the same. But it does take some of the energy out of it because these guys aren't showing off for that audience for the first time. It doesn't have that same kind of allure in a sense. And so, I don't know what to do about All-Star Games. I think that there are always ways to try to make them weird and fun and see if you can get the players engaged. But at the end of the day, I do think people need to accept that it's an imperfect event that is somewhat archaic given the economics of professional sports now versus the 80s.
I don't. It's not something I would miss if we didn't see it moving forward. You know what I mean? Like it's. I feel like they've tried so many ways to make it work that it's been tough. And each event, like you said, has had its own marquee kind of moment that you look forward to. And then once it's done. Like for basketball, it's the dunk contest, home run derby for baseball. For the NHL, for a while, it was the skills competition when you had the ones you knew, like you were waiting for Chara for the hardest shot to see if he could kind of defend his title. You look forward to this right now, I guess it's the fastest skater, but I feel like the guys have kind of pulled up and really trying for that one over the last little bit. So there was things you used to look forward to. I think for the NHL, they've just tried everything to see if they can get it to work.
I'm going to make you a pitch right now.
All right,
so this is a pitch similar to how I feel about the Olympics. What the NHL does is it picks somewhere on, I don't know, a border between the United States and Canada, whether that's I don't know the layout up there. So whether that's with Minnesota, whether that's the Detroit, Toronto area, wherever it is, and they find a frozen ass lake and they play the All-Star game outside on actual like river ice, whatever. Like go play on a frozen lake.
So like the Lake Tahoe game?
No, because that was a rink built on a venue ground. I'm talking about like go play, basically pick up like you would when you're a kid or whatever. I don't know if this is real. Canada's a fake place. But like, you know how you like see in videos and cartoons and stuff, people like run out the back door, grab their skates and stick, and then the next thing you know, they're going up and down the fucking river. Do that. Yeah. That would be so dope. It just pick one place every year. It's one place every year. It's at the same place. The NHL owns that venue. And it's just, if you want to go see this, you travel to this place. We're going to put it on TV. We're going to put up the rigs. It's going to look sick. We're going to play it like dawn or dusk. Sorry, dawn's early. Dusk is late. We're going to fucking go for it. It's going to look so sick. They'll never do it, but that's the only way to save the All-Star game that I can think of, is to make it something that gimmicky.
Yeah. I don't know the logistics behind it. I think that the Rideau Canal in Ottawa by Parliament has skating on, I don't know the width of it, and if it's possible, that would be really cool to see, because that usually freezes over enough that you could do it. But they'll never do it because of the liability behind it of skating on a frozen lake.
Don't let the lawyers look. We're not in charge. We don't have to talk about the lawyers. We can pretend that they don't exist.
I mean, yeah, in theory, great idea. I would watch just for that. Yeah, it'd be amazing. It'd be amazing, but they'll never do it.
Yeah, the NHL All-Star Game should be an outdoor game, and I think it should be played like pond hockey style, because then it's about speed and skill, and you don't need these guys to hit each other. It's just like, oh, if they don't make good passes, then I have to watch fucking Connor Bedard skate 100 yards to go get the puck because it just flew out of bounds. That would be so... Yeah. Could you imagine, like, the Corey Perry Stadium Series walk where he has to walk that whole way, but it's Connor Bedard skating with his head down to go get the puck because he missed his pass? That's so funny, dude. That is such a great... Once again, people need to put us in charge. We're very smart.
Yeah. It'd be amazing. I'd love that. And listen, you can still do it if you figure out some way around the liability, and you almost like build like an artificial ice out on the pond, like you do something with it that you can kind of say it's safe. So you're like establishing a rink out there where it's not going to break out there, but
just
something like
bring EMS. It's going to be fine. Just have a bunch of EMS guys there.
Yeah.
It's going to be fine.
So, okay, I was going to go... the last thing I want to touch on this before, obviously, we slide over to the Ducks because we're almost an hour and I haven't talked about the Ducks at all. Bettman did mention for the next event, for the World Cup, that they want to obviously expand it out. No gimmicks this time, but to at least 8 teams. Begs the question, do you think Russia ends up being one of those teams when we get to that point? He mentioned briefly, or touched on it without touching on it, to kind of dance around it, that it all depends on how everything works out politically with that. But the tournament's better with Russia in it, right?
Yeah, 100% it's better. It's, like I was listening to Puck Soup earlier, and they were talking about the like fakeness scale. I think this was on the mailbag specifically, but like the fakeness scale of the Four Nations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And McIndoe made a really good point, which is that we can criticize it for being limited to 4 teams, but we can also all admit that the most likely and the most desirable outcome was USA-Canada, and that none of the other countries involved, with the potential exception of Russia, maybe, would be able to impact that.
Yep.
So we don't have to pretend the tournament was illegitimate, and that's, to an extent, that's ridiculous in that sense. And I think that is fair, because Russia does typically tend to underwhelm at these international tournaments. However, 3 of the 7 best goalies in the world right now, with the understanding that they're not playing super well, all of them in the year, are Russian. And if there was ever a chance for Russia to really make a big push and win one of these, it would be on the backs of that Sorokin, Shesterkin, Vasilevsky netminder trio.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that part is relevant, and I think they have to be in the next tournament, man. Like,
you know what just sucks though is that Ovi won't be there. That's we missed being able to see that over the last little bit.
Yeah,
right?
well,
like
he kind of went out and made sure Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid knew that he was pissed about it, because the Caps put up 7 on both of their teams in back-to-back games.
Yeah, and he scored a hat trick in one of them. So,
I just think we would be depriving ourselves of the best possible chance to get a special tournament if we don't bring Russia with the talent that they have, and Michkov delivering the way he has early in the season, with Demidov looking like he's going to be the real deal. You've got Kaprizov. Like, I mean, from a Ducks perspective, you've got Minchikov, you've got potentially Galimov, right? But there's all of these great Russian players right now who could have an opportunity to really, like, show off and be like a good team and win, some competitive international games. And like, I get in theory why they're not there, because you just can't invade a foreign country. But like, again, I don't know, maybe this is just getting like a weirdly political episode. Bro, nobody yelled at the U.S. when we just rolled into Iraq and Afghanistan and we're just like, we're taking over your entire country. Thanks. We were still at the fucking Olympics. Nobody did anything. So I have a really hard time saying that they should be excluded for shit that my stupid fucking country has already done. Like, it's not a straight up comp, because they're like trying to like annex and add this country to like Russia as a whole and be like, this was actually always Russia. But like, let's be honest, like, we weren't over in Iraq and Afghanistan because we were trying to put in hospitals. We wanted the fucking oil in the ground. Like, we were over there as part of like economic imperialism. So I don't know how I'm supposed to think it's justifiable that we've finally developed an international conscience with the IIHF. And it's just because it's fucking Russia. And it's easy to be mad at Russia. I'm not saying they don't deserve it, but that doesn't mean they're the only ones who have pulled some shit like this in my lifetime. Yeah.
And I do think sometimes, again, you can, in those instances, separate sport from it, and you can try to. I understand why they did what they did. And on an international scale, and the Olympics tend to be more political than other events, and they can be because of the nature of them, of almost every country in the world being involved.
Right, but they can't even go to the fucking Worlds in.
That's what I'm saying. In events that are, especially like the World Cup, like it's governed and run by the NHL, you can make an exception there. You're bringing your own players who play in your league. But again, they won't if the IIHF says that Russia can't participate in events. Then they'll just follow suit and they'll say they can as well. So it's when Gary Bettman says it depends what the IIHF decides.
No, for sure.
At the end of the day.
It's been very weird this whole time to not feel like it's a little bit hypocritical and not because it's easy points on this side of the world to go after Russia. And again, I'm not saying they don't deserve it. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be fucking publicly fucking shouted at and embarrassed and stopped for what they're doing. Like, I'm not saying any of that. That's all true. But also, bro, like, I'm 35 years old. I was born in 1989. Like, I've seen my country do some weird shit, some weird, gross shit that would theoretically prevent us from playing in international tournaments if this is what we're saying the rules are.
If Trump acts on the 51st state stuff, does that mean you guys are out of the Olympics?
Yeah, but it probably means so are you guys, because we're going to have to go full World War II, and it's going to be like baseball players playing like in the fucking war again.
The last thing I will say on it, and what I do miss is from these international tournaments, is there was always a couple big games. There's Canada, U.S., Canada, Russia for us, and obviously for you guys, I'm sure because of Miracle on Ice and everything, there is a little bit of a USA-Russia rivalry as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you miss that, right? Because now it's like for any tournaments, World Juniors, World, Four Nations, whatever, you're really just building up to USA Canada. You get it once, and then you hope that
Sweden
you get
Finland
it
is
again.
good.
Yeah, I would say Sweden Finland is good.
Well, I
And
think
it's
like
very
you
good
have to
rivalry,
hope
but
that Sweden Finland
yeah.
is a good game because they're obviously gonna fucking care. They're gonna go for each
Yeah.
other's throats. But
Yeah,
like,
but there's no history between Canada Finland really. Canada Sweden, USA Finland, USA
Right.
Sweden. They're games. They're big games because they're talented teams. But it's just another game. If it was USA Sweden in the final, Canada Sweden in the final, whatever, two other teams facing each other, it certainly wouldn't have had as much hype. It certainly wouldn't have had as many viewers in it. You're missing that from World Juniors and from World International stages. That other game that's just as big, Canada versus Russia or Russia versus the U.S. You're missing that, right? Like that. Those are two extra games that you would get that you're not just building up to Canada, the U.S., and then hoping they meet in the final, right? Like, and just hoping that you're going to get that other big game, which is what we did, right? We got that game.
yeah,
The U.S. won, and then you're just like, okay, fingers crossed Canada can actually win the game they need to win, and they'll meet again in the finals. Otherwise, it's just not going to be as exciting. Like, everybody wanted that, barring Sweden, Swedish fans or Finnish fans. Right? Everybody wanted Canada and the U.S. to be in the final. So I think for me, that's one of the reasons I want Russia back. Is it's just more exciting having another team that have a legitimate chance of winning it.
yeah.
Right, like. Sweden should, but there's always something that gets in their way in every tournament, at every level, at every age group, that they just can't seem to get it done. And the rest of them, Finland, Czech Republic, the list from Germany from there on out, it'd be a massive underdog story if they were to win it, and it just doesn't happen. So to not have a team in the mix that you could say are legitimate contenders, almost maybe potentially equal with Canada and the U.S. It's just tough to say. You just kind of look at it and say, okay, we're just missing this little bit that could make it that much better. So.
Oh, 100%.
Okay, well, we made it over an hour. We probably should talk Ducks hockey.
So there are three things to talk about?
Yeah. So their play, they went 4-1-1 since our last pod, 7-2-1 in their last 10. We'll get into that now. I'll touch on the other stuff we have to cover too, because it comes with those games. Trevor Zegras obviously getting suspended, and the Ville Husso trade that just went down, and some of the reactions to that. So that's all kind of reactionary to this. But I do want to talk about their play since the last pod and over the last 10 games, because in theory it means they're, and I guess in reality they're doing well, and they're winning games, and they're playing better hockey. But we've started to see the talk, and you can understand why the talk's there, but we started to see the talk about the Ducks being in a playoff hunt, potentially being a playoff team. They're 6 points, at one point, 6 points out of a wild card spot. And I think that has maybe grown all the way to 10 points now for the last two games, if not more. What are your thoughts on that? Because we knew it would come at some point, and to our, to talk about what we said in the preview for this year, the best we can hope for is the Ducks being in the wild card picture and being in the playoff hunt. But we've talked offline about this, and and the reality of if this really is a playoff hunt or not, or just playing well for 10 games, and we'll see how it goes. What are your thoughts on everything?
I think so. Like by the numbers. Let's see. I just had it. I was looking at the ESPN there. NHL standings, wild card. This is awesome audio. So they are currently 8 points. They're now 8 points out of the last wild card spot, which is Vancouver. They have 57 points. Vancouver has 65. There are three teams between them: St. Louis, Utah, and Calgary. So only one team in their own division outside of it.
Mm-hmm. Ducks have a few games in hand on Utah and St. Louis as well.
Yeah. So, like, in theory, yeah, they're technically in a playoff race. It's not like out of the question that they could get hot and, like, get within 2 points, 3 points. The problem with that is they had to go 7-2-1, which is a 750 points percentage, in order to get within a long shot of the playoffs. So they were an unsustainable stretch of play away from needing an unsustainable stretch of play to be in the wild card conversation. Nothing about this season has made me think that there is anything here of substance beyond it's the end of the season. Teams are tired. Teams are hurt. Teams are rusty. And the Ducks have the best goaltending tandem in the NHL. Those factors combined can create a situation where you can see a team like Anaheim go on a run. You can see them do something interesting. But again, they had to go 7-2-1 to be a 7-2-1 stretch away from being in.
Yeah, they had to win 7 of 10 to be a 500 team. They were 5 games under 500 before this run.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's my big takeaway is this just feels so fake because nothing about the way this team has played over the course of the season, even over this little bit of stretch where they have been a little bit better, makes me think that this is legitimate and sustainable progress in a meaningful way. This really feels like they got some bad teams. Because, again, let's
5-1 win over a struggling Penguins team, a 5-2 win over a struggling Predators team, a 6-4 win over the Kraken, 4-1 loss to a decent team in the Flames, 3-2 win over a struggling team in Montreal, a 2-1 win over the Stars, which is a decent win, a 2-1 shootout win over the Kings, which is just always a tight game, a 3-2 overtime win against the struggling Bruins, and then recently 5-4 loss in a comeback effort against the Red Wings, and a 3-2 loss in a collapse against the Sabres after being up 2-0 with about 15 minutes to go. So nothing really stands out as significant. There are some good wins and some solid wins.
There's 2 good wins in there, and one of them is a fake
say
good
Kings
win.
and Stars.
Kings and Stars, 100%. Yeah. The Stars are a good team. The Kings are a good team, and it took shootout to get the win. Now, took them to a shootout. Fair is fair. Can't say you didn't do that. But 2 good wins out of a 7-2-1 stretch is not
also made 43 saves in that Kings game, by the way.
Right.
So
this is maybe you want to say Leo Carlsson is heating up or getting better, and I think he is getting better. I think his play over the last probably month and a half.
2 goals and 5 assists over the last 10 games.
Like we've seen his play start to continue to grow, right? But again, nobody on this team looks good right now, with the exception of 2 players. Well, let me say this. None of the skaters look good except for 2 skaters, and that's Troy Terry and Jackson Lacombe. Troy Terry's been good, flat out. He's just a good player now. Jackson Lacombe, bit of a revelation in a sense for what he's really shown this year. And I keep coming back to this. He is the best example that you can point to of Greg Cronin is having a positive effect on this team's growth and development. And Patrick Present of the Hockey News, yes, talked to him and got a quote from him. And Greg Cronin said, I think he's a bit farther ahead of these guys because he went to college and he was developed. He's farther in his development. So the one player that you could point to as an example of Greg Cronin's ability to develop players, he's flat out saying it's just because he's older and farther along in his development, which again furthers my opinion that nobody on this team is better than they were before, other than they've started to just play more games. And the head coach picks the lineup, but there's not a lot of options. These guys aren't getting scratched. These aren't, you know what I mean? It's not going to happen. So, what are we doing here? What about this am I supposed to be able to hold on to for the last 25 games of the season and go, there's something worth watching here?
Yeah, I mean, Jackson Lacombe's also 3 years older than those guys, too.
That's
It's
what
not
I'm
even
saying.
development-wise, just having more time on this earth to play hockey at a higher level. He's just been there, right? So it's tough to say. I mean, like, so the last 10 games, Mason McTavish leads with 7 goals and 2 assists. Great stretch from him, but again, there's no Greg Cronin stamp there. It's just a guy playing well that's finally getting things going, that had a tough start to the season. Leo Carlson is up there, 2 goals and 5 assists. We mentioned Lacombe Terry with a goal and 6 assists in the last 9
Time
games.
out real quick. Go back to Mason McTavish. You said he had how many goals in how many games?
7 goals and 2 assists in 10 games, the last 10.
That's half of his production of the season.
Yeah.
So he had
He's just
7
getting
goals
going.
in 41 games before that.
And I have to believe 3 or 4 of those are power play goals.
Yeah.
I know at least 2 of them are, because he had 2 in the last recent couple games on the power play. But and the other guys, Terry 7 points in 9, Vetrano 5 goals, 7 points in 10. They're just the guys who should be going. Cutter's looked better, but it's still 4 goals over the last 10 games, no assists. So he's just starting to kind of get more adjusted to playing at the NHL level. But he's young, right? And Zegras, since coming back, 3 goals, 3 assists in 9 games. Now he's got the suspension. But it's just the top guys are starting to play better and put the puck in the back of the net, so they're winning close games because they're getting still good goaltending. Like I mentioned, 43 saves in the shootout win against the Kings for Dostal, and they've had good goaltending in some of these games. But they're all 1-goal games. The majority of these games, I think the last 6 or 7 are 1-goal games. Since the Calgary loss, they've all been either a 1-goal win or a 1-goal loss. So they're in tighter games for sure, but they've had 2 tough teams in Dallas and the Kings to play. So I can't buy in and say it's real. Listen, I've loved it. I love that they're winning games. I love seeing the Ducks win games. I love seeing the guys that are supposed to perform well. But I'm not going to sit here and say, well, yeah, okay, statistically we're 6 points, or we're 6 points, now 8 points out of a playoff spot. You can try and get excited for it, but the reality is that they're not going to make it. Like, they're just not. We can sound pessimistic and like downers all we want, but like, you got to look at the reality of this. Like, this has not been a good team. This is a team that's played some bad teams late, and teams that are struggling lately. They got hot and they won 7 of 10 games. Come back in 10 games, if they've won 7 more, then I'll gladly say I was wrong. But all signs point to this just not being sustainable, as it has been for the entire year. Any team can get hot. We've seen it. Now, 10 games is a hot streak. 20 games is consistency. Again, talk to me in 10 games from now. We've already been 0-2 over the last 2 games. Talk to me 10 games from now. Let's see how they are, and maybe I'll revisit that statement. But nothing to me points to this team in, end of March, early April being in that wild card conversation.
Their next 7: home of Vancouver, home Chicago, at Edmonton, at Vancouver, home St. Louis, home Islanders, home Washington Capitals.
I mean,
if they win 4 of those games, if they go 4-2-1 or 4-3, okay, maybe I start to buy into it a little bit more. But like, I'll
extend it at 1 game from there. They have Utah after Washington. You've got Vancouver twice, St. Louis once, Utah once. You need to win all 4 of those games to be in the conversation.
If you've got
to beat Vancouver, Utah, St. Louis are 3 of the teams in front of you. You have to beat all of them.
And I don't, I get like, I saw some people say that the Trevor Zegras hit was selfish because he got himself suspended. Like, dude, I don't know, man. I don't know how I'm supposed to think it's legitimate. Like, I don't see how it's bad. We'll get into the hit. But like, I don't know how anybody is looking at this team and going, they're genuinely in a playoff hunt right now. Like, the only way you say that is if you look at the standings. And I get that that's kind of how it's defined. But also, we have brains. We can extrapolate. We can bring larger amounts of information into our decision and analyzing process. Like, how do you look at this team, as terrible as they are, how bad they've been defensively, and go, if they keep up this unsustainable level of play, even for a good team, they might have a shot at getting swept in the first round. Like, what am I talking about?
we can't even say 7 of 10. They did this for 7 out of 8 games. They won 7 of 8 because they've lost the last 2. For an 8-game stretch, they were very, very good, or just playing well enough to beat teams that they should beat. The goal scoring is common. Really, the goal scoring really came in those three games against the Penguins, the Preds, and the Kraken because of the goals that they scored. They scored 16 of them in those 3 games. From there on out, they scored 1 against the Flames, 3 against the Canadiens, 2 against the Stars, 2 against the Kings, 3 against the Bruins, 2 against the Sabres, and then 4 against Detroit. But the majority of those goals came in those 3 games against bad teams, the Penguins, the Preds, and the Kraken. So goal scoring came at a time they needed it. They got good goaltending in some of these games, and everything kind of came together for an 8-game stretch there where they won 7 of them. But we've had how many games before that, right? Like, we've had 40-plus games before that where the consistency hasn't been there. So I'm going to go with the larger sample size and say, like, this is just a run that they went on and everything kind of lined up for a little bit, which is what you hope for. It does show improvement. It means for 8 games they were able to at least pull enough together to win 7 of them, right? Like, we haven't seen that in a very long time. So there is something there to show that they're putting some of the pieces together. But when we're talking playoffs, like, they need to then continue doing this for the rest of the year to make it. Because, like we said, they're still only a 500 team after doing that, after winning 7 of the last 10. We saw 40 games of inconsistency. To sit here and think that they could possibly continue this and the consistency would come through, I'm just not in a position I can say that. If they prove me wrong, then they prove me wrong, and this team has taken significant steps forward that I didn't suspect that it would happen. But you're being a little bit too optimistic to sit here and just look at the standings and say, okay, we're 6 points out, we're a wild card team, and we're at the same level of these guys. We're just not. We just got hot, and a lot of these teams around us have been losing games, and that's just the way the standings have shaped out. But I'm not in a position, again, like I said, 10 games from now, if they beat, if they beat Vancouver twice, if they beat the Blues, if they beat Utah and they win 1 more of those games, let's say they beat the Blackhawks, because they should. If they win 5 of those next, how many games is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 5 of those next 8. So they go 5-2-1 or 5-1-2 or whatever it is, 5-3-0. Like, I'll believe a little bit more, because standings-wise, they'll be very close after winning those games and picking up those points, and they'll have beat the teams they should have beat, right? So, yeah, I'm just not at that point, and I really hate to see the conversation. It just irks me a little bit when you see it saying, okay, well, hey, this team's actually a playoff team. Well, they're really not that good yet. Like, let's temper expectations.
And here's the ultimate thing for me. We've played 3 fewer games. We have 3 more points. So we've played 3 fewer games in Seattle, and we have 3 more standings points than they do. And we still have a worse goal differential. We have the 4th worst goal differential in the West, and the only teams with a worse goal differential are San Jose, Chicago, and Nashville, who are a special trio of suck this year. Mm-hmm. Now, it's cool that, like, we're not in that little group at the bottom. But, like, there was so I don't really know, like, what streams you watch the games on, if you get our streams or if you get it's
50-50.
Yeah. But there was a game where they put up that, like, this team is, like, 21 standing points ahead of where it was at the same game mark in last season. And it's like, yo, that's objectively great. Like, very cool. But also, all the underlying numbers saying this is one of the worst defensive teams in the league. Gives up some of the worst chances, like some of the most high-danger chances.
Still give up the most shots per game.
Tons of shots. Isn't generating at an elite level. Isn't generating at a middling level. Generating at a bottom 10 level. And we know it's goaltending. We know straight up the only thing keeping this team anywhere into the realm of competitive is goaltending. Yeah. There isn't anything else. Like, so when I was talking about looking at the expected goals above replacement, the reason I was looking is The Ducks have 3 players above 2.5 expected goals above replacement. Troy Terry at 11.7, Jackson Lacombe at 10.8, and Alex Killorn at 8.4. After that, it's all guys with 2.2 or lower expected goals above replacement scores. And over half the team, 14. Sorry. Nope, I lied. 18 players. I think that's right. It's 18 or 17 players have a negative expected goals above replacements score. This team is not playing well. None of the players that we need to get better are getting better in a meaningful way. The system isn't working. They're not executing well. Like, I just don't understand how you don't look at this and go, yeah, man, it's goaltending, and they could have great goaltending all year, and it's going to get them the 7th pick instead of a playoff spot.
Yep. I mean, listen, like we can talk about advanced analytics all we want. You can look at basic stats, and you should be able to come out of it saying it's all goaltending. Like the Ducks are the worst team in the league in goals per game. They have the second worst power play. They have the second worst shooting percentage in the league. They have allowed the most shots on goal. They have the 26th worst penalty kill, but they have the 20th. They're 20th in goals allowed per game. Like, even right there, you see the offense isn't clicking, so they're not winning games and outscoring guys, and that's not how they're winning games. Their offense doesn't click at any level other than just shooting the puck more. They're 21st in shots per game. Defensively, they allow the most shots in the league. Their penalty kill isn't good, so they're not even benefiting from a good penalty kill. But their goals against is still kind of bottom third, or almost middling in the league, and that's just right there obvious that it's goaltending. And then obviously when you watch this team and you see some of the games that we've won, 43 saves from Lucas Dostal, 40 plus saves from John Gibson here or there, right? Even tighter games where they've made 20 to 25 saves, it's been Dostal or Gibson who's kind of willed the Ducks to victory in those games because they haven't scored enough goals to really put them in a position to win. It's just obvious watching that, saying that. And sure, good goaltending can be enough sometimes to mask some bad results and get you in a better position. But when nothing else is going for you consistently, how are you to say this team is a playoff team? And again, the reason we have won 7 of the last 10 is because the goaltending's still been good, but the offense has been there, where it hasn't been all season, but it's been there at times over this last stretch of games. And in the games that it wasn't there, your goaltending has pulled you through. So there's been a little bit more to their game because they've been scoring more goals than they're usually used to. There's no evidence to show that can continue on a consistent basis. If it does, again, I'm happy to be wrong because it means the Ducks are playing well and things are moving in the right direction, but there's nothing to say that that's going to be the case based off the results, the higher sample size of results that we've gotten this year.
5 against Pittsburgh, bad goalie. 5 against Nashville, Saros is having a terrible year. 6 against Seattle, no good goalie. 3 against Montreal, no good goalie. 2 against Dallas, good goalie. 1 against LA, middling goalie. 2 against Boston, good goalie, having a middling year. We scored 4 against Detroit, bad goalie, and we only put up 2 against Buffalo. Again, we've said it, a number of times, we don't need to keep harping on it. But all it takes is 2 minutes of free time to realize that the standings are an illusion and that there's nothing that has meaningfully improved about this team in such a way as to make me think that anything is different about how I feel about the season. I don't know what it would take, but even if they made the playoffs, it wouldn't make me feel better about this season. It would probably make me feel worse because that would mean Greg Cronin's still in charge. And I'm not getting off of that. I'm just not getting off of that. He has to go. And every time they win one of these games against a bad team, all it does is it gives him, we're turning it around. 7 of 10. Look at us. It's like, okay, cool. Thanks, bro.
The whole media discourse again, I love these guys. We look at Eric Stevens is out there writing articles. Oh, can the Ducks do it? Are they actually good? Can they be? They're within this many points of a playoff spot. Can they make it? That's where the conversation shifts to, right? Oh, again, because you've won 7 of 10.
Yeah,
so
well,
that's
Steve,
where
I mean, look, I don't have The Athletic anymore, so I haven't been able to read that article. I get the framing of the article. I get writing the article. I don't know
you
what
have to,
conclusions he's drawn, right? I can't speak to that. But like,
yeah, I haven't gone through it, and I'd imagine because he usually is, he's probably a little bit more grounded than what we've seen from kind of just the fan reaction on either X or on Blue Sky being a lot more positive, saying, "Oh yeah, they can make the playoffs." I'm sure, just knowing and Eric Stevens' work in the past, he's definitely more grounded from it. But it's just the media focus shifts to that because
right,
the Ducks
that
are
becomes
playing
the
well,
question.
and it is this for real? And look, they're this far from a playoff spot, and that's where it becomes the question. And again, from what we've seen, the way the results have gone this year, there's a better chance that things revert the way back to they are, and then the conversation again shifts back to, okay, yeah, the Ducks aren't that good, and we had a little nice stretch, which is great, and it's showing improvement, but the one main piece of the puzzle there is the consistency is just not there.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad. So look, the other thing we'll get to the Zegras thing in a second, but they made the trade for Husso the other day.
Yeah,
Ville Husso, expiring contract, like $4.75 against the cap. Comes to Anaheim. I'm fairly confident he immediately went to San Diego. All the expectations are he is going to be filling in down in San Diego. There was some conversation early on about, does this mean that Gibson is going to be traded soon, or was his injury from the Boston game more significant, and so they're trying to shore it up? All early reports thus far are that neither of those things are imminent. He is considered day-to-day and should be back in the mix fairly soon, and there is no trade to be expected in the next couple days. Now, the trade deadline is the 7th, so there's still some time. But there isn't anything immediately to make people think, that's what this was about. Mm-hmm. On paper, it looks like they added a goalie with a significant cap hit for future considerations. And I said it straight up, and I said it to you. This feels like a bit of a whiff just because feels like you're going to want to get something to take this deal on. And then you explained it to me in a way that made so much sense. I literally told my uncle it annoys me how smart you are. Or how logical you are, however you want to look at it. I'll let people decide how smart they think you are.
Yeah.
But I think you're pretty clever, and it annoys me. So explain, as you did to me, just again, what you think this Husso trade is really about.
So it stemmed out of frustration, for one, to say, because I saw the discourse online being that people were upset that the Ducks took on this much cap space and didn't get anything in return for it. And just ignoring the other factors, I could understand that argument. The Ducks took on $4 million plus in cap space, $3 million now with some of it being buried in the AHL. That's actually directly affecting their cap for a player who's not playing at the NHL level. You take every other factor out of it, sure, I get it. You're taking cap on from a team, they're just dumping it for the cost of nothing, right? So what are you getting there, right? You want to get something out of it. I understand that in most situations that makes sense. This for me is completely different, because one, Callie Klang is out month to month right now in San Diego. Thomas Schuhanek has been out since the beginning of the year. So it was the Callie Klang show and Oscar Danks as a somewhat playing every now and then backup and just really not doing as well. It was Callie Klang who was running the show for San Diego, and the run that they've had to get back into a playoff spot. Like, they've had a really good run. They're 7-1-1 over their last 9. A lot of guys have started moving in the right direction, playing well, and they're making a playoff push. Both those guys go down. John Gibson goes down, and then Oscar Danks has to get called up and to be the backup for Lucas Dostal, because at this time, those are the only 2 healthy goaltenders on the roster beside Vyacheslav Butsiets, who has played 1.5 games for the San Diego Gulls this year. that's the goaltender that they're starting with at this point due to all the injuries. And when John Gibson comes back, then Oscar Danks comes in and plays, who I think he's played maybe 6 starts in 12 total games this year. And they're in a team pushing for the playoffs. So when you take those into consideration, you bring Ville Husso in from a team who was looking to get rid of him because, sure, it helps them. They dump some cap space. The Red Wings weren't actively looking to dump cap to add a player. They weren't even really that much against the cap. I think they had $8 million in accrued space already before moving Ville Husso out the door. So it wasn't a cap dump situation where they were desperate to do so and you're helping a team out so they can go make other moves. The Ducks are also getting a goaltender who's been fairly good in the AHL this year. .912 save percentage. He's played most of the year for their team. They bring in a guy they can confidently say is a starting netminder for San Diego to push them into the playoffs. And it didn't cost them anything to do so. You know, there's some desperation there from the Ducks needing a netminder to help the Gulls get into the playoffs. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, it's the Gulls, who cares? It's not the NHL roster. You got to get assets to make the NHL roster better. But at the end of the day, this is a business, and the Gulls have a lot better chance of making the playoffs than the Ducks do, and that team matters. Like, that team still matters. Not only should it matter, but it matters to the organization that team does well, and the players that they have in the pipeline do well and can get into the playoffs and you know, make a run for it. And when you're starting netminder right now due to injuries has played 1.5 games, that's not good. And when the backup is the guy who's played about 6 or 7 games is the guy who's going to have to be the starter for the rest of the year, that kind of dampens your playoff hopes. So at the end of the day, when you can bring in a guy and it doesn't cost you anything and he can and it fills a significant need you have in the organization, I don't see the issue with it. And like the argument being like, okay, you could have got maybe like a 5th round pick for taking that cap space on. Maybe a 4th, something like that. Like, I don't see it. Like, I don't see the issue. I understand the argument. For me, I don't see the issue with it because, again, you're filling a need. The Ducks were desperate, and you didn't have to pay anything. Like, I can make the argument that the Ducks could have had to have paid something for Ville Husso because of the desperation that they're in, and it's almost like 2 guys who know each other just doing each other a favor. The Ducks need a goaltender. They're desperate. Other teams might make them pay to bring in a guy, even an AHL netminder. And Yzerman doesn't really want him. It's a buried cap hit for the rest of the year. The Ducks have a ton of cap space. Why not just dump this guy out the door and he doesn't have to worry about it anymore? And it's a win-win for both sides.
Yeah.
I don't see a problem with that. I really don't. Like, those deals happen. And great, it's 2 guys that know each other, whatever. You can play into that however you want. Can happen with any team. It just so happened this works out for both teams. They get what they need. And sometimes those deals happen. You don't always have to get A for B when a team's moving cap out the door. There's other factors that come into it. And that was my whole argument with this, and the thing that made me so frustrated is outside of the vacuum of just the main picture of this one team A is dumping cap space, so team B should get something for taking on that cap. There's several other factors that go into why that doesn't really matter in this situation.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a ton of sense. I think it's good. I think, you know, especially with where the team and the organization is at developmentally, like you said, not only is it important to kind of reward, in a sense, the players in San Diego by bringing in someone who can help them, you also kind of just like have to do it because the situation is so dire.
Yeah.
And like it's good for them to get those games. Like them getting playoff games in the AHL level is objectively good for their development. And like, you know, like I think the downside is so insignificant. And you know, like I said, like I definitely was like at first just like, what the fuck, man? Why are we not getting like a pick or even like, you know, a C+ prospect, right? Just like someone who's like, yeah, maybe he's a 4th line winger in 5 years. Okay, cool. You know, I do think that gets a little close to some of the like finance bro-ification of sports that bugs me, where everything's transactional and everything's about, you know, objective external value and shit. Like I don't enjoy that part of it, but I understand that is a part of it that has to be considered. But like you said, it's not hard to make an argument that Anaheim is the one gaining the most here because the situation with Detroit already was they had plenty of cap space. They had that $8 million. I think I saw it on Blue Sky. Had $8 million in accrued cap space. They were going to keep continuing to accrue more because they aren't up against the cap. You know what I mean? Like they were going to be, and if they had to move some pieces around, they were going to be able to make it work. Steve Yzerman's, if nothing else, flexible in a sense, I guess, and willing to do things.
I mean, they have no significant extensions coming up. They have no significant extensions kicking in for next year. They even have money coming off the books. Like, it wasn't a situation where, like, oh God, they have to get this money off the books to be able to bring a guy in or sign a guy or bring a guy in at the deadline. And like, for the whole San Diego thing, like, you also can't just pretend that team doesn't matter.
No, it matters.
You can't just act like they don't matter because it's not the NHL level, right? Like, and that's what I felt like was getting put across there. And listen, if you're taking on like Nick Backstrom's $9 million contract or something, yeah, okay, he's not going to play for you. You should get something for doing that. Or if you're Marner's getting traded or Sid's getting traded, and you're the team eating cap space off that, and you're not getting anything other than eating the cap space. Yeah, you should get something for doing that.
But you're getting the player. You're getting the player
a body
on
here.
The contract.
Yeah, you're getting a guy who's gonna play, and you're filling a need at the same time. Like, this team needs a goaltender. This organization needs a goaltender who can play. Let alone it does now, because you're filling that need. I know it doesn't directly impact Gibson in the sense that Ville Husso could be the backup, but it does provide you the flexibility to still go out and make a John Gibson move, because we've talked John Gibson trades in the past. Any move wherever John Gibson goes with the teams that are interested in him, some goalie is coming back in that deal. We've talked Cal Peterson, we've talked Tristan Jarry. Somebody's coming back, right? Like, there is a Calvin Pickard, somebody that can be the backup to Lucas Dostal. Having Ville Husso now nailed down starter for San Diego because Calle Klang's not there, it just opens that flexibility back up to do that, because now you don't have that need that John Gibson goes, you're going to bring a netminder back. Ville Husso's still the AHL goaltender, right? So it's still, there's no extra hole now to fill. So it does open up the flexibility there, whereas I know it doesn't directly impact the ability to trade John Gibson. It just opens that up as a possibility to do so again. So I don't know, man. My main gripe, the trade's fine. It's a non-factor really in terms of the success for the Ducks this year. My main issue was just the fact it immediately went to Pat Verbeek sucks because he didn't get anything for bringing in cap space again. Like, come on, like, this is different. I understand the frustration with that, and he said he's going to utilize his cap space and he hasn't. You got to be able to sit back and look at the situation and understand it's a bit different than that. Then instead of just jumping to the fact that, oh, I see this guy has a $4 million cap hit and we got nothing for it, must be the same. Like, it's just lazy at that point to just do that. And I get it. I totally get it. I totally get the initial look at that and say it is, but like, you've looked at it in a different way, and you can understand it's different, right? There's still people out there who have looked at it after that and saying, no, Pat Verbeek sucks because of this deal specifically.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this is, I guess, maybe we'll have this as part of the trade deadline conversation, but like, a friend of mine made a comment to me, I don't know, I think it was yesterday, and it hurts the most because he's a Habs fan and we hate that, but he was just like, Pat Verbeek might not be good at this. And I think
he might not.
There's been some frustration among fans about how poor the results, especially early on, were, and about how frustrating this process has been. And I think there are some fans who are like very ready to move on from Pat Verbeek. And I'm not there yet. And I think ultimately this trade does not push me in any one direction. And I think that's okay. You know what I mean? If a trade like this happens and it doesn't make me think, wow, he's the worst fucking GM in the world, then it's a fine trade. It's just fine. That's fine. I don't care. I
don't think he's necessarily done anything bad. And I think the worst thing he's done almost is inaction. It's just he hasn't done something.
Well, I mean, look, we can I'll fucking keep hopping on this horse every time it rocks right by. But like, bro, I mean, to me, the biggest mistake he's made so far is Cronin,
Yeah,
and that's not
fair.
nothing.
Yeah,
That matters to me.
yeah,
That really matters
yeah.
to me because we went from Trevor Zegras being one of the most promising young offensive talents in the league to it being hard to argue with people that he's an underwhelming bust.
Yeah.
And
And
again,
I think
as
I think
people who watch
that's
the games, you know what I mean, who watch this team religiously, right, who aren't following the league as
yeah.
a whole, but are following this team, and that's our access point to the league. Like, I could sit here and tell you, like, well, there's this and well, there's this, but I can also tell you, like, yeah, man, he hasn't played great, and there's been some issues, and I do think most of it is in his head because he knows that he doesn't have the trust of this coaching staff, and that this coaching staff fundamentally wants him to play and behave in a way that is antithetical to the things that made him a successful hockey player his entire career.
Yeah, I don't even discredit and get mad at Verbeeks for the signing initially, because we even said, you can understand it. This team maybe needed a stern voice in there, whatever. We had our opinions on it at the time. We said it is what it is. It's an interim thing. I know we talked Matt McIlvain at the time, saying maybe you're hoping that this guy can take over. If not, you're waiting until you see some progress, and then things go bad, and then Cronin goes out the door, and you bring in the right guy when the right guy comes available. My issue with it is the fact that we've seen it doesn't work. We've also had some kind of ridiculous stuff outside, with the issues with him and past players, and then you've still stuck with him through all that, right? Like that's my criticism for Verbeek more than bringing Cronin in the first place, because we all said it is what it is. It's fine. It's now that you've seen it kind of not work, and you're still just kind of riding it out. Like, what are we waiting for at this point, other than, like we've said, maybe you don't feel organizationally that any of the guys behind him are able to take over, but that's also a mistake at yourself and who you've decided to hire for the coaching staff, that you didn't put a guy on the bench that maybe you thought could be the interim guy, and that the guys available in the market right now aren't guys that you think are comfortably can say are better, because there's just not a ton of guys out there that are available. You can wait to the end of the season and maybe the Sullivans or Brunettes or somebody becomes available, but that plays into it. But I do start to lean towards some criticism for Pat Verbeek for sticking with him for so long, when clearly on ice things haven't worked, and then off ice there's been some very public issues.
No, 100%. I mean, yeah, I think the logic behind the hiring is reasonable, holds up. I get where he was coming from. I think I was hoping for it to be executed in a slightly different tone and manner, and it hasn't been, and that's rubbed me the wrong way. But it also just flatly hasn't been successful. And more than anything, that's the bar. And, yeah, man, I think that he could have fired him 3 or 4 times this year, and all of them would have been justified. They don't seem to be doing that. It feels like he's going to make it to the end of the year, which is very disappointing for me as someone who said I didn't think he would make it past the trade deadline. And at this point now, again, like I kind of said earlier, winning games is bad as far as I'm concerned, and not just because of the draft, but because all you're doing is giving Greg Cronin ammo to be like, look, you see how as they got more comfortable towards the end of the season, things improved. It's like, well, I don't know that that's actually what happened. So yeah, I just to me, it's clearly a mistake, and I think you're right. There, at this point, this shift comes from, is he going to, or should he do it, to when will he do it, and how much will be lost between when he should do it and when he does do it. And I think a lot of people feel that it should have been done already, and there's nothing to be gained by keeping him here.
This offseason of any for Pat Verbeek, for me, is very pivotal in terms of my opinion of him and him proving himself, because last offseason he came out publicly and said the team needs a top 6-4, that he wants to acquire I think he said a right shot right winger and a top 4 defenseman. That was early on in the offseason, almost right early into the offseason, and then they didn't do anything. and people were critical of that for good reason. So was I. Now you go into this offseason doubling down basically on that and having those options available to you. Marner potentially hitting free agency, Rottenen hitting free agency, some the ability to still make trades. You have a draft pick that you could move that could be a top 10 draft pick. We've talked Noah Dobson and other players out there you could go get. Like, there's potential to have a very big offseason. So if you don't do anything again there, that's one thing. The other thing is now you've got the whole Greg Cronin situation and whether you decide to keep him or not. So now you've got the roster side of things plus the coaching side of things that Pat Verbeek will ultimately define how the offseason goes this year. He could hit and miss on both, and then we're looking at a really kind of abysmal, bleak situation for next year. Or Cronin goes and he signs Mitch Marner in the offseason, and we all kind of forget about the criticisms for a while because some of the promises have been made good on.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think a lot of I think that's right. I think we've seen two big swings from him in back-to-back drafts, and now it's time for him to make his mark on this team in free agency. I think the free agent signings that he's made, the trades that he's made in and out have largely been successful. I think Jacob Trouba's been fine. I think he's provided a little bit of toughness and physicality to the back end in a way that's good. I think he plays a slightly different game than Radko Gudas is. I think mentally and emotionally he fills a little bit of a different role, and I think it's good to have him around. Look at how good Hellison has looked. The Manson trade is a success at this point. You know what I mean? Like, they got meaningful assets from it. I'm pretty sure one of those assets was a pick. The other was Drew Hellison. Like, it looks fine right now. It looks positive. The Hampus Lindholm thing, I'm pretty sure one of those picks turned into Leno. Maybe Pastia, but like things are heading in the right direction. Vetrano, Strome, Killorn, Gudas. I think that these signings have been successful. Klingberg is the big one that's just a big old fat miss, and that's not going away, but it was fixed 5 months later, right? That dude was gone by the deadline. He was in Minnesota. And we got Nikita Nesterenko, who we've seen be up and down a little bit and is an interesting player for a bottom six role in this team in the future. There's the Verbeek, the totality of the Verbeek experience to this point has been, I would say, overwhelmingly positive. But you would like to see him have a killer instinct in a way that just Bob Murray never had. And some GMs just don't have. They don't have the fucking courage of their convictions to just make the big turn. Like, look, it fucking failed, but Nashville went out and did shit. They earned being at the bottom of this by trying some stuff. I'd rather you try stuff than, just kind of putt along and hope something happens, especially with these players being largely unproven still. I think this deadline is going to be really interesting. I think this deadline is a prologue to this summer and what we can expect Pat Verbeek to try to fix and address with the holes on this roster. And
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see. I think we want to do a whole separate deadline episode, so I'll shut up. But I don't know. Do you just want to do the Sussy real quick?
Yeah. I would say I don't think I had anything left to say for that other than the deadline could be fairly quiet, but the off season is going to be kind of.
It's got to be a big thing.
Again, you promised it last year. You came out and said what your targets were, and you didn't do it. Now you got to do at least something. You have the actual ability this year, outside of trades, to also maybe potentially sign some superstars, some elite players to push this forward. So it'll be big. But yeah, the last thing we have is the Zegras 3-game suspension for his headshot on Michael Rasmussen. What are your thoughts on it? He wasn't ejected from the game, or he stayed in the
No,
game,
he
right?
wasn't
It
a
was
penalty
after
called.
thing. Yeah, right. Okay.
So, like, my process of finding out about this play was very funny because I honestly just, like, forgot that there was a 3 o'clock game on Sunday. So we were out running errands and stuff, and we went to, like, Costco and stuff. And on the way back, I was, passenger princess, and I was watching it on my phone. And I just see Sherratt just punch Vetrano out of nowhere. After the period is over, he's skating by, and Sherrod just sticks his hand out and just pops Vetrano right in the face. And I was just like, I don't understand what just happened. Like, I don't know what would possess him to do that. It just seems so abnormal. That's nuts. Like, Sherrod's having a meltdown. And then I'm like on Blue Sky or whatever, and I see the Rasmussen hit. I was like, oh well, yeah, that'll get your guy popped in the face. Like, you can't go out and hit a dude like that. Like, that's gonna get your guys popped. Like, that's the way the game works. And I was like, okay, like, I still don't have a very high opinion of the way Sherratt handled it, but I don't have an issue with him like addressing it. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it was a very stupid way to kind of respond, just because you're standing right there, everybody can see you, the period is over. Like, historically, these are things that lead to punishment from like the league or the officials and stuff like that. And I think he got a penalty that went over into the next period. But it was just kind of like, oh, okay. And you watch the Zegras hit, and Zegras hits him right in the head with his shoulder. And he takes the guy out, and you're just like, yeah. And it's a late hit, and he very clearly is going for the hit. Like, there's nothing about the hit that I felt was good. There's nothing about it I felt that was arguable. Like, you watch the video from the Department of Player Safety and they break it down, and you're just like, yeah, that all makes sense. That's 3 games if you say it that way, right? I will say, for me, there were 2 things about it that I thought were interesting. To me, this felt like the version of Department of Player Safety people want and rarely get. Trevor Zegras has no history. He's got a fine for a slash, but it's whatever. But he got 3 games right off the rip. I thought he would get 1 or 2. 3 is 1 game would be significant. 3 games is significant. And like I said, I thought he would get 1 or 2. I had kind of landed mentally, I think, on 2. And then he got 3. And again, like I said, yeah, I understand it. I do think it's interesting in the sense that, like, this very much feels like I said, like the Department of Player Safety that people want, but not the one that we really get. And so there was something interesting about it in that sense of, like, this, again, I cannot stress enough how appropriate the decision felt. It just felt odd because I don't feel that the Department of Player Safety has, like, earned the benefit of the doubt of me being able to go, they're a very consistent governing body and all of their rulings make sense, and you can put them all into things that largely you can get to why these rulings go this way. I also didn't like that Sherratt didn't get a fine. Again, I don't think he needs to be suspended, but, like, you can't punch guys in the face. I think that should be a suspension. It wasn't in a scrum. It wasn't in the run of play. It was completely after the whistle. It was a complete blindside jab to the face. That's $10,000. That should cost you $10,000. And, if Rasmussen wants to pay the fine for Sherratt for sticking up for his boy, if, the Illich family, I think it's Illich, wants to pay the fine, you know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, like, but, like, you shouldn't be able to just, like, punch a dude in the face like that. Like, I did kind of like, that should be a fine. Beyond that, like, I don't know, man. He fucking hit him in the head with his shoulder. I don't think he was trying to hit him in the head. I don't think he was picking the head by any stretch of the imagination. He didn't jump into the hit. He didn't do anything overly reckless. He just very clearly was like, that guy's skating and I'm going to hit him. And then the guy was like, all right, off the boards. And he was like, he doesn't have the puck. I'm still going to hit him. And then he not only he hit him late, but he hit him high and he got him in the head. Yeah, man, you're going to get in trouble for that. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you can't do that. I don't mind seeing it from him. I just wish he would have gotten his check right.
At the end of the day, you're right. It's a bad hit. It's one that should get some form of punishment, but it just feels every decision from the Department of Player Safety feels weird because you just kind of don't know what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they do what you expect or what you hope they should do, and then sometimes they just don't do anything when they should, and sometimes they do way more than it warrants for the reaction. So it's just kind of all over the place. You hope that this being kind of the appropriate decision and what you would really want for them in an ideal situation is a step in the right direction. But like as much as we talked about the consistency with the Ducks and knowing that like this could just be a one-off situation, like it could certainly be that. But this is what you'd like to see. Like there's nothing I can look at it. This hit checks all the boxes of it being a
suspendable play.
They don't want to see it suspendable, and it's a player who the history comes into the fact that you probably didn't give him more games. If he's done this multiple times, you probably give him 5+ or more.
Sure.
But the player history doesn't come into it in the fact that he's never done this, so we're not going to punish him at all. Like no, this is a hit that is suspendable, regardless if he has a history of not. Like this checks all the boxes, so yeah, we should suspend him for this. It doesn't matter that he hasn't done this before, and that's what I like about it, in the sense that they didn't look at it and say, okay, well he hasn't done this, so that's fine. I think player history should really only come into it when we're talking like length and severity of it. And if this guy's like a repeat offender, then we can look at give him a longer punishment because of it. But a hit's a hit, regardless if this guy has a history of doing it or not. So I don't think we should look at not punishing a guy because he doesn't have a track record of doing it. Every guy who has a track record of doing it has had to do it for the first time at some point, right? So you still got to punish these guys according to the play. So it is what it is. Like I don't think, again, like you said, I don't think Zegras was trying to hurt somebody. He wanted to finish his hit. It wasn't the smartest decision. I don't think he was actively seeking his head.
I think it was an emotional play. I think he's been very frustrated by the way the season has gone. I think the game was frustrating him.
They were down at this point.
Yeah, I get it. Like I get, I will say this, when he did it, all I could think about was like panning over to was it you who sent me, this is the only way I'm gonna watch highlights from now on TikTok, and it was the highlights of the US Canada final.
Yeah.
But think of that very just like meme-ified cuts video. All I could think of was cutting to Jacob Trouba on the bench, just like yes. That's all I could think about was how funny it would be if Jacob Trouba was just like, my Padawan is learning. But again, it's a bad fucking hit, man. You can't do that. And again, like I said, it's gonna get your guy popped. You pull that shit, your guy's gonna get hit. I don't love the way Sherratt went about it. I think there are better ways to do it. I think he could have done it in the red of play. I think he could have tried to make an example out of somebody and go after somebody else, right? Go after Zegras, right? There are different ways to handle it, but I don't mind him handling it. And I think if you're Trevor Zegras, you have to understand, if I make a big hit and I miss and I take one of their guys out of the game and injure one of their guys, I'm going to cost one of my guys something. It could be me, it could be my teammates, but someone's going to have to pay for that. And so, this time Frankie paid. And if that, that's just the way it goes. I'm sure, Frank's more than happy to kind of to pay the price on that one in terms of, he's a vet, he's a feisty dude, he's in all the scrums, he's never found a player too big for him to get into the face of. I don't think he cares. But if you're Trevor Zegras, you have to go buy that dude a steak and be like, yeah, I'm really sorry, I got you punched in the fucking head.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm sure Zegras is smart enough to know that it wasn't the best play, and this is a guy who has a penchant at times to just kind of get a little bit hot-headed and get show this frustration on the ice, and it's just one of those moments, man. It happens to almost everybody at every time, and it just depends on how you end up venting that frustration out, and this just wasn't the best way to do it.
He just got it wrong, man.
It's like you said, it was a frustrating game. The Ducks were down 3-0 after 5 minutes. Yeah. It just was not.
And for the record, a good game. You really hope Michael Rasmussen is okay and he's able to come back. I don't know what his injury history is like. I don't know what the status of the current injury is after that. You hope if he's having concussion issues, they're not chronic and they're mild and he's able to kind of get back, because we know that stuff's compounds and that's why that stuff is so bad. You hope he's okay, but again, it's a fucking contact sport. This stuff is gonna happen, and that doesn't make it okay, but I don't think that makes it inherently evil.
No, as long as it's properly dealt with.
Zegras,
In this
he's
case,
not Matt
it
Cook.
was.
You know what I mean? He's not Rafi Torres. He's not Jacob Trouba, who's got a history of questionable on the line hits and some that are very overtly over the line. This isn't any of that. This is a guy making a mistake, trying to make a big play or do something to kind of get his guys going, or just take out his own frustration. We've all been there. It is what it is. But again, he got his guy popped. He's going to have to sit out 3 games. He's going to have to pay a nice little fat check to the players, party fund or whatever the hell it is. And I don't know that it needs to be more than that. I don't think that this needs to be an indictment of Zegras' judgment or his character or, any moral failings that he may have.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody needs to be mad at the Department of Player Safety. Be mad, I guess, next time when it happens to one of the Ducks guys and they don't get 3 games or some shit. But that's again, he deserves 3 games for that hit. I don't think it's an unfair. And so even if it is frustrating down the line or in the past with it not being level and following any larger precedent and having any history to it, being we know that these guys are reliably going to do the right thing in every situation, there's no way to say he didn't deserve it. So as far as I'm concerned, it just is what it is. I don't know that there's too much to talk about. He says, as he's talked about this for 20 fucking minutes. But you know what I mean? I don't think there's anything there other than Zegras made a bad hit and he paid the price in multiple ways.
Yep. No, 100%. And it was nice to see him back because he was starting to get going. Like we said, 6 points over the last 9 games.
Is he going to miss both Vancouver games?
Buffalo was the first game he missed, so then...
Oh, he'll miss Buffalo, Vancouver, Chicago.
Yeah, so he'll be back for the other one. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately he'll be back in the short term, and he'll learn from it, and it was the right decision. I'd rather come out from it and say the Department of Player Safety. I know we can't do that often, but they came out and actually made the right decision this time. Hopefully that's something we can start saying more often after this. I doubt it. But yeah, man, it is what it is. If this is Trouba who does this, we're looking at 5-10 games.
Because it's 10 games.
Because of the history comes into it at this point. But Zegras benefits a little bit from the fact that he hasn't done this more often. He won't get that much leeway next time if this happens again. And then we can start to worry about him specifically as a player who has an issue with this. But the first time it is what it is. The punishment is the punishment regardless of their history. The history I think you can take into account when we're talking longer because they have a penchant for doing so. But at the base level, that hit for anybody, barring anybody who has a history long-term for doing this on a regular basis, this is 3-game suspension for anybody. Connor Bedard does this. Connor McDavid does this. Anybody that doesn't do this on a regular basis, that should be a 3-game suspension, and hopefully we continue to see that moving forward. But I think that's how we have for this one. We just hit over 2 hours, which is great because we're back on the 2-hour grind. Which means we've got plenty more time for another show when we look at the trade deadline coming up and really kind of break it down in more detail. I don't see it being a majorly busy day for Anaheim specifically, but there's a whole lot of other stuff that could happen. And for me specifically, I can't wait to talk about Mikko Rantanen potentially going back out the door, which is just fucking wild that's even a possibility. So I'm looking forward to it from that sense, but this is maybe one of the years where now with Vetrano locked down that I don't see much coming from the Ducks. I don't see much happening.
I'm really excited about Ryan Strome going to Washington to play with his brother, and somehow Pat Verbeek is going to bring Ryan Leonard back the other way.
That would be great.
Dude,
that would be a miracle work.
I don't know what
if he
we
was
would
able to
we
pull
would
that
have
off.
to give up so much, but I would love Ryan Leonard on this team. All right, let me ask you a question real quick. This will be the last thing we do before we go.
Mm-hmm.
So after that tournament, after the Four Nations, can you think of a player that you saw? Well, I'm going to just ask this as a very leading question. It feels hard to come out of that tournament and not go, God, it'd be really nice to have Brady Tkachuk in Anaheim, because he provides such a different dynamic on almost every level to how this team functions. I mean, did anybody come out of that tournament looking better than Brady Tkachuk? Like, I get on an off the ice sense, people are like, kind of like, yeah, he's a fucking idiot, Chud, and yada yada yada, and I get that. The Tkachuks are my boys, but I get that they would embarrass me at a party in public. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's hard to say Brady Tkachuk didn't kind of have the perfect tournament, because there's always been some talk around him about him feeling like, yeah, he's putting up goals and he's generating chances, but he does it all from a foot from the net, and he does it on a bad Ottawa team, and somebody's got to score the goals, yada yada. The play went up and he went up.
Mm-hmm.
Those moments were not too big for him. He was so down for everything. Like, he was getting aggressive on the forecheck. He was getting aggressive in the neutral zone. He was scoring goals. Like, man, it's hard to watch that tournament and not go, damn, bro, everybody wants a Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah. My thing always with Brady is I think he's a great player. I just think he's not the guy to drive the line by himself. Like, he's a great guy.
But if he has like Leo,
anywhere.
like if it's Leo and Brady,
yeah, exactly. If he's got support,
now we're cooking.
He's a perfect piece for anything. Anybody wants a guy like Brady Tkachuk who can pretty much do everything. The guy hits, he shoots the puck a lot, he wins faceoffs. He's hard to play against. He does a lot of his work in front of the net. He scored their goal against Canada from like 2 inches in front of the net. He's a grinder. He fights. He does everything that you could possibly want, and he's still a very talented hockey player. He's got 30 to 40 goal potential. 70, 80 points on any given season. The only criticism you can give for him is that, like, I don't trust him to be McKinnon, Crosby. You can put anybody with them, and they're going to drive the play on their own. He needs a little bit more help, but whatever. Most players do, right? There aren't many McKinnon and Crosbys and guys like that are going to be able to drive the player on their own. So I would love to. He had a great tournament to show all his skills that we already know he has, but putting the whole toolbox together on a better team, and it's still working, and him still being that valuable player. Because there was some. You could argue there was similar players in terms of it being a very physical, Swiss Army knife type American team where there's like a lot of guys who can do a lot of things. He still stood out as being like the primary guy for that, as a guy you can throw it in any situation and you're comfortable having him out there.
Yeah.
And he's going to be one of the best players on the ice. So from that sense, that you look at a lot of the other guys at the tournament, he jumps out as being a guy that did what you expect but at an even higher level, and coming out looking better because of it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Mm-hmm. I would love to have him on the Ducks. It'd be great. I mean, he's a guy that's somehow been in trade rumors as potentially Ottawa looking to move him out the door. I don't know why, but if that was ever a case, I mean, I would give up a lot to try and get him in Anaheim as a piece. I do think the Ducks still need a franchise piece, like a Mitch Marner or something like that I could say is the guy. But certainly, I mean, it doesn't hurt to get a Tkachuk in there, especially like you said. If you think Leo can be that guy, then you might put all your eggs in that basket and hope he is that guy, and you put a Brady Tkachuk with him, and all of a sudden that unlocks a lot of things for him. Yeah,
I completely agree, man.
All right, but yeah, deadline show coming up hopefully this weekend. We got to get it out soon because the deadline's in like 9 days. So the plan is, we talked about this before the show, is to get out the next few days here and rip that one out as well. And just kind of cover, obviously, a lot of stuff on the Ducks and what they can do, but that can only go so long for the show, and there's a lot of other stuff I know that both of us want to cover with other teams and potential moves out there, so we'll look at that as well, and just kind of the trade deadline as a whole, with obviously a decent portion of that time focused on the Ducks and what they can do. But it's fun, man. I'm excited for the trade deadline as a whole. I think I'm less excited from a Ducks perspective than I have been in recent years as potential for big moves. But honestly, I could use the break of not having to worry about this guy and that guy going out the door, letting it be kind of a hopefully relatively calm deadline that leads into a pretty hectic offseason.
I would like one good surprise for the Ducks. I would just like one good surprise. Just one thing that I'm like, wow, we did that? Damn. Yeah. That would be nice. That would be
we're good
nice.
for at least one. Usually one thing to happen. One interesting thing usually per deadline. So I'm open to it just to see what could happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's Fabry, it's Dumoulin. We'll see. I don't know. I haven't heard anything updates about Dumoulin after he's injured.
Anything outside of Fabry or Dumoulin coming in or out is a surprise. Is what you said. It's just something, okay, I didn't expect that. Because really all that's left is those guys. Brock McGinn, you could have normally said before the injury, but that's not going to be the case now. So it really is the only two obvious ones are those two as guys that could be out the door. And any surprises are like Zegras or Gibson or Strome, like you said, or something like that, or bringing somebody in and bringing in more assets, other than going out and getting a young player or something like that. It would be interesting, man. I'm Deadline day is always fun. It's become more of a deadline build up to the week more than anything, where we get a lot of excitement a few days out. But I think that I would love to see another deadline day where we see a lot of it on the actual day again. That would be nice, and I'm sure the TV crews who are there for however long, 12, 14 hours during the day, would love a little bit more action on deadline day, because I've watched TSN the last couple of years, and it's been a lot of skits and segments to try and get them through the day, because the trades that are happening are not majorly exciting.
Was it last year that had the Bruce Boudreau?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
It's
gotten worse and worse over the years.
I would be a happy camper to get one real good surprise. Yeah, I don't know, man. I got nothing else.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's great being back, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the show, and we will see you soon.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much.